Good morning, YouTube. My name is Amos Bro. Today is the 22nd of December 2017. I hope all is well with you. This is the first of 3 days for the Canadian Game Show Countdown, or reviews that we're going to be doing. Today it's going to be the Mad Dash. Tomorrow it will be Talkabout. And finally we will do Pitfall, hosted by Alex Trebek, and it is in no way related to the video game Pitfall of the same name. I will explain actually how that works when we get to it on Christmas Eve. So that'll be fun. The Mad Dash is an interesting game show because while I have the exposure to it, I've seen less of full episodes of that than I have the other two game shows. But this one has a very unique fondness for me because I love board games, and that is exactly what this show had. It had a board game feel, and it featured two teams. Now, the two teams could be any type of relationship: best friends, brother, sister, husband, wife, you name it, you can have it. The game is basically played in two different parts. There's the question and answer part, and then there's the actual board game itself. And they are affected. The player who is at the podium with LaLonde, or the players that are at the podium with LaLonde, they're the ones who control the fate of their partners on the board. And you have to get from the start line all the way to the finish line by exact count. They play with that rule for them. So you can't get a 5 when you need 4 spaces and win. If that happens, you'll go back 1. But that can actually work for you or against you, especially when it comes to money, because I'm going to explain this now. You can land on the same space twice and have the same effect happen over again, or reward a penalty. So that is something to keep in mind as the game goes on and as we discuss it. The die in this show has 5 numbers, 1 through 5, and a dollar sign. Kind of like Jack Clark's Dealer's Choice, where the end game, which, honest to God, reminds me of On a Roll from Price is Right, had a spade on the 6th side, and that was something you didn't want because it ended your game. Here, if you get the dollar sign, it adds $10 Canadian. Well, if you can roll it 3 times, you get 50. Now, I don't know what happens if you roll it again, but it can happen. But you do get to keep rolling until you land on a number. Interestingly enough, and this is one of those games that uses what I like to call a die pit. What I mean is, the person who's rolling is going to roll it, or as basically it looks like they're doing it, they're batting it into the pit down below. The number that appears on it, or the dollar sign, is the number of spaces a person has to move. Now obviously you have to win control. To do that, what we do is this. LaLonde asks a question. The question is always a multiple choice. The person who gets it right gains control of the die and allows their partner to move. And of course, like I said, if they make it to the end of the board, by exact count, they win. This game has a very unique format, though, because it can take 1 or 2 losses to eliminate a team. I'll explain. Okay, so every time a team wins, they can keep going. However, if their opposing team already had 1 loss on their record, that team is eliminated from the show. However, if this was their first appearance, they have a clean slate and they can go till they lose again. Here's the catch. The losses actually carry over. So if the team that loses 1 time comes back and wins 2 straight, they keep that loss, and their next loss, no matter what, eliminates them from the show, but they keep all the cash and prizes that they won up to that point. That's why I said it was a little bit confusing. Because when I watched an episode, I was like, oh, wait, how are they doing this? Okay, makes a little bit of sense. Now, the board has a bunch of different spaces, and we're going to go over, not all of them, because we'd be here for 2 hours, but we're going to go over some of them. Actually, maybe we could go over all. We have the roll forward, roll backwards, the roller rolls again, and the dasher moves either forward or backward respectively. Obviously, you want the one that goes forward. Roll over. The roller rolls again, and the opposing dasher moves forward. Free roll or miss turn. A free roll, if you land on this one, well, this is kind of self-explanatory. You don't have to answer a question. You can roll again. But if you get roll over, your opponent gets to roll. Change places. I mentioned this one already. This is a bastard. Or it can be a reward. So, if you are, let's say your partner is sticking ass answering questions, so you're stuck all the way at the start line. But your opponent lands on the change places space. Guess what? You now are where they were, and they are now stuck back there. But there could be a way to gain ground, and that's called the breakaway space. I'll talk about that one in a second. And there actually is one called back to start. The dasher returns to start. There's also one called dash. The dasher is asked a true-false question, and the roller rolls a die. A correct answer moves the dasher forward, but a miss moves him or her back. I have yet to see an episode with that one on there. Breakaway. This is an interesting one. Okay, so here's what happens, and I've seen this used. Whoever lands on that space, their partner rolls the die. In this case, the dollar sign doesn't count. You roll 1 to 5. If you get 5, that's the maximum number of seconds you can run. Here's where it gets tricky. When the clock expires, the judge has to determine the exact space that you landed on by using the camera. Now, if you're Usain Bolt, you may be able to make it from the breakaway all the way to the end. I've never seen somebody do that, but that would probably be pretty interesting if somebody could. But that is what that space does. And believe me when I tell you, it could definitely make a big difference in somebody's match, especially if they get the maximum 5 seconds. We get dice game, which involves this. The roller rolls 2 dice. If both show dollar signs, the team wins $100 on another roll. Otherwise, the dasher moves ahead accordingly to the total. By the way, some of these I have not seen, like this next one, the card game. The roller draws 1 playing card from an oversized deck. If a number card is drawn, the dasher moves ahead that many spaces, and each counts for 1 space. However, if a face card, king, queen, or jack, is drawn, the roller rolls die and the dasher moves back that many spaces. So there, you don't want that. But those are just some of the spaces. I'm not going to sit there and read all of them. But those are some of the spaces. There actually is one called Happy Birthday, believe it or not. That's an interesting one in and of itself. Anyway, now the rules that I just gave you may or may not sound confusing. Oh, and I did mention the exact count thing. So here's what happens. I'll repeat it just in case I forgot to mention it earlier. On the die, obviously, as I mentioned, the die goes 1 to 5. Okay. In most board games, the player, if there's an end, because sometimes they just go straight around the board until time expires or whatever. In this game, there's an end line, obviously. Your objective, when you get to that part of the board, is to roll the exact number you need to get there. So if you rolled a 5, but you only needed 3, here's what happens. You would move the 3 and then move back 2. See what I'm saying? Now that can work for you or against you. It can move for you, especially if one of the spaces before the finish line was a money space. Say it was, oh, I don't know, $100. There is also a space, by the way, on the board. I didn't read it off, but it's called double money. Double your money. If you get that, any money that you've acquired, your money total gets doubled. And of course, any prizes you land on the board are yours to keep so long as you win the game. You don't keep them if you don't win, obviously. Like I said, I've only seen a couple full episodes. One of them was from Lake Martindale's Vault. But I enjoyed this show thoroughly. Like I said, the rule set takes a little bit getting used to, especially when we talk about the win-losses situation. However, if you can get past that, well, guess what? You're in for one heck of a treat. And Pierre LaLonde was honestly one of the best hosts that I got to watch. And every so often he would crack wise on the contestant, especially if they jumped the gun and then got the question wrong. Which, trust me, that can happen. I've seen it happen on more than one occasion. I should also tell you that there's a special thing they would do. They would do what is called a mini dash, where they would have a contestant come down, or an audience member come down, and they would do a 2 out of 3. They would have to answer, or was it 3 out of 5? I think it was 3 out of 5. Anyway, they would have to answer a certain number of questions correctly, and if they did, they won a prize, and they would answer the questions from a stack that Pierre had sitting at his table. So it's a really cool show. If you can find episodes on YouTube, by all means. Because trust me when I tell you, this show is crazy when you watch it, especially if somebody gets the breakaway. Because if you get the breakaway, I think I've only seen the highest I've seen somebody get is maybe 3 seconds. I don't think I've seen somebody get the maximum number of 5. But it can happen. And it can also happen if you check out the episodes and let me know what you think. Anywho, that is it for this one. Tomorrow, we are going to be visiting Wayne Cox as we talk about one of the most hilarious game shows I've ever had the pleasure of watching. And, of course, Wayne does his job well as a host. We're going to be talking about Talkabout. And a very interesting idea that would be borrowed about a year later for a Lifetime game show called Rodeo Drive. But I'll explain that when we talk about Talkabout. I'll see you tomorrow. Actually, I'll see you tomorrow for the game show review, but I'll see you in the next video because we have some very important news coming up and I need to talk about it. So, see you in that video. Later, friends.